I'll hand over now to Cory.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up historical analogies because they're my favorite way to frame copyright. When you delve into the history of copyright, what you find is essentially generation after generation of pirates becoming successful in donning admiral's hats and describing the things that the next generation of innovators do as raw piracy, and the thing that they did as having been legitimate progress. For example, the record industry built its back on ripping off sheet music publishers, and it wasn't until a compulsory license was passed that allowed for mechanical reproduction that sheet music publishers were compensated at all. At the time, the sheet music publishers and composers especially were outraged by this. John Philip Sousa, great American composer, said, if these talking machines are allowed to continue, America will lose its voice boxes as we lost our tails when we came down into the trees. And many points to Sousa for being an early advocate of the still controversial theory of natural selection, but many points off for missing the fact that the future of the music industry was electric. As the head of the Edison Trust reminded us, this was the precursor to the BPI, who said if you want to protect musicians, be sure to protect technologists and innovators at the hearing on the legality of this sort of thing. Of course, just as soon as the first record companies came into existence, along came the broadcasters to rip them off, dropping the needle on records, playing them without compensation, eventually legalized through a blanket license. And just as the broadcasters were ramping up, along came cable TV operators to rip them off. And just as cable TV was finally settling down and enjoying its admiral's hat, along came the VCR, and the cable operators came after the VCR and said, what you guys are doing is piracy, what we did was legitimate progress. And then, of course, the companies that sued the VCR manufacturer, or the companies that made the VCRs like Sony, found themselves on the other side of the lawsuits against peer-to-peer companies. And at every turn, the answer has been to legitimize the piracy, to legalize the piracy, to find a way to pay artists without criminalizing the public or holding back innovators and putting them at the mercy of incumbents. A cold war between the internet and entertainment companies benefits no one. It has not reduced piracy. I think we can all agree on that. There's more piracy now than there was 10 years ago. And it also hasn't put any money into artists. Here we are, 30,000 lawsuits against music fans later. Here we are, innumerable lawsuits against tool makers later. And where are the artists? They don't seem to be walking away with more money. And where's the public? Well, they don't seem to have gotten the message. The downside of all this, if you don't care about the future of the record industry, is what it does to the future of the body politic, of civil liberties. What we've seen as the collateral damage in this Cold War is increasing incursions on personal liberty, privacy, and the right to communicate. So, for example, we have a proposal that ISPs should wiretap all the bits on their network and watch to see which bits are naughty, and off their own say-so, decide if the bits are naughty, to terminate that connection, to filter that connection, to shake it up like a snow globe. So an ISP is expected to be able to have technology that can distinguish, for example, between your conversation with your gran in New Zealand that happens to have some copyrighted music in the background and a file sharing communication. And what we've seen with the Google filter, for example, is that there are innumerable false positives, that when judges can't decide what's fair dealing and what isn't, algorithms are certainly not qualified to do this. And we have an even graver proposal in the form of a three strikes rule, which we've seen promulgated in New Zealand and proposed here and through the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement. This is a proposal that says if you are accused 3 times of infringing copyright, that wire that comes into your home that delivers freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, access to your family, your job, your education, health information, civic engagement, and all the other uses that we have for the internet, and not just for you, but for your entire household, should be terminated or grossly retarded. If you saw Time Out last week, there's a great article on life inside Britain's largest prisons, and you find that the convicted felons, one and all, are pursuing degrees through the Open University using the internet. Having been convicted of felonies, they will be entitled to more access to communication and tools than people who are merely accused of infringing. So the disproportionality of this is easy to see. No one is proposing, for example, that entertainment companies who make 3 false copyright accusations should have their internet access terminated. But where I come from, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. So, for example, the recent bogus request from Prince and his label to take down a 40-second clip of an adorable 2-year-old dancing in his kitchen while Let's Go Crazy played in the background, 2 more of those and Prince and his label lose their internet access. I don't think many of us would say that that sounds like good policy for business. It's not good policy for the public either. So there's a better solution, an evidentially supported and historically supported solution, one that maps to all the things we've done the previous times that pirates and admirals have clashed with one another. And that's to acknowledge that it's going to happen. and then find a place to collect a toll, and then to collect that toll, making sure that it's low enough to get buy-in for the majority, and making sure that the toll itself is fairly distributed. So the International Music Managers Fund has produced a very good paper on the characteristics of a 21st century collecting society, and transparently distribute money to labels and artists without insisting that they use a certain protocol, a certain file format, or any other way, eroding the future-proofness of this. And then when you have a fair deal, you sue the blistering crap out of the few people who don't want to opt into it. It works for PROs the world around. It delivers shareholder value, it pays artists, it decriminalizes the public, and paves the way for innovators in the future. Artists can thrive in a world in which commercial and non-commercial copying is distinguished. As you heard, I'm a science fiction novelist. My last novel was on the New York Times bestseller list for some months. It's published here.
No more time for promotion.
And I will finish by saying then that book was available as a non-commercial download simultaneous with the commercial release in its 8 hardcover printing, because my problem as an artist isn't piracy, but obscurity. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a very explosive beginning, and I think it's probably the only time that the phrase blistering crap has been uttered within these.
Let it not be the last.
And,